The Dutch Grand Prix was full of disqualifications, disheartening results, and for one F1 fantasy content creator, a disappointing wild card. But what can we learn from Zandvoort? Let's find out. What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of F1 Fantasy Pole Position. It is Monday, August 26th. My name is Ewan, and on today's episode, we're going to be going over a Dutch Grand Prix race review, talking about what happened on Sunday, what happened on Saturday. We shall not try to touch on the Alexander Albon news too much, and what is kind of leading into the Monza weekend, as there's a weird situation going on with Haas. But let's just jump into it right here. Dutch Grand Prix highlights. Lando Norris picks up his second career win. Started on pole, totally bottled it yet again, but that McLaren has so much more pace than Red Bull. It showed in qualifying where Lando finished about 0.35 seconds ahead of Max in qualifying, and then it turned out that is about how much speed he had on him every lap once he got past him. I think the commentator said 0.4 seconds per lap is what Lando ended up stretching out over Max. I think he won by 22 seconds, which is the biggest gap this year. Alexander Albon suffered a disqualification in qualifying after his floor was not meant to meet the regulations, according to the stewards, which was super disappointing because he had a P8 in the bag. And then on Sunday, he scored 12 points. So he ended on -3 for the weekend. But if we just taken that P8, which would have been 3 points, plus that 50, we would have been looking at a massive price rise for Alexander Albon. So that is once again F1 fantasy giving us bad outcomes for good process, because a lot of people were on Alex Albon. The Williams looked pretty good. He qualified in P8, so he had the speed. And then on Sunday, he put together a good race. Just some regulations punishing F1 fantasy managers. So that was a bit of a bummer as well. Red Bull and Mercedes lacked pace on Sunday. Max was fine. Perez finished 6th, so it's not that bad. But Lewis Hamilton started 15th after a 3-grid place penalty on Saturday for impeding Sergio Perez. He also didn't make it out of Q2, so that was further disappointment for Mercedes. And George Russell started P4, got off the line, beat Oscar Piastri, but just could not compete with Piastri or the Ferraris, who finished ahead of him. And that's the next point. Norris and Ferrari with great Sundays, fantastic pace from the red car from Italy as they head into Monza. Something to definitely check out in Friday and Saturday's practice data. Like, have Ferrari figured it out? It was looking like a really disappointing weekend. It was like Mercedes, McLaren on Friday. Lando was saying that Mercedes has the fastest car, and he kind of expects them to win. So that is why I put my DRS boost on George Russell. I was like, okay, like I know Lando's usually downbeat, but that sounds pretty good for Mercedes. And George is a little bit of a differential. Don't think a lot of people are going to be going there. So I took the gamble. It did not pay off as McLaren and Ferrari wiped the floor with Mercedes on Sunday. Norris with fantastic pace as well. Piastri, it's tough to say that he had a bad day, starting P3, finished P4. Leclerc kind of undercut him and George Russell. And just, you would think that McLaren would have enough pace to get past the Ferrari. So I'm not sure if that was a driver issue or a car kind of thing. But Lando looked plenty quick. So I think we'll need to maybe listen to the quotes afterwards or what's coming out this week. Pierre Gasly matches his best result of 2024 in 9th place, had a really good weekend. The F1.com data let us know that Alpine was kind of on it this weekend. They had pretty mediocre qualifying simulations, but pretty good race pace. They were 7th in race pace behind the Williams, which I guess proved out because Albon climbed up the ranks quite a little bit. So great job by Alpine, and not Esteban Ocon, by Pierre Gasly. And then the next situation here, the last highlight of the Dutch Grand Prix, is Haas can't leave the track yet. They are being sued, I guess, by their former title sponsor, the Russian oligarchy, the Mazepins kind of thing, after they have apparently not received payment for getting paid out from their sponsorship deal after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And yeah, it sounds like the Dutch courts have kind of upheld this, and they are evaluating Haas's assets to be seized, if that's going to be like if that's going to make up the money that the Russian title sponsor has apparently lost in money. So I think as of this morning, Haas's equipment has not made its way to Italy yet, and they are waiting for like a process or a receipt from the bank account and getting stamped approval of authority in the Dutch courts. So that is a tricky situation to kind of monitor throughout the week as well. Doesn't have like tons of F1 fantasy relevance, but it could have a lot of consequences if like both Haas drivers just can't go to Monza or they don't have the cars to go to Monza next weekend. So definitely keep an eye on that in the F1 fantasy world. Moving over from the highlights here to the facts and stats. Points scored: Norris 56, Verstappen 28, Leclerc 26. Those were your top three. Positions gained: Hamilton with 6, Sainz and Albon with 5, Charles Leclerc with 3. Fantastic drive from Charles Leclerc on Sunday. Like, just Ferrari kind of nailed it there. Great job by them. Overtakes: Hamilton 11, Albon 8, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, and Gasly with 5. And then fastest pit stop, VCarb with 10, McLaren with 5, and Ferrari with 3 as well. That is actually VCarb's second 10-point outing, or the fastest pit stop they've had in 2 of the last 3 races. So I know we're not really going there, but just something to think about. Maybe like a late season punt at one time if VCarb is on it in the fastest pit stop department. Over here in the optimal teams, 128, 124, 120, and $116 million budgets here. If you're listening on the podcast side, come over to the YouTube side. You can see all this. The constructors right down the grid, McLaren and Ferrari, they both had the best weekends. 2 times on Norris at 128 and 124 million. You should have doubled up Norris with Leclerc. And once you got down to the 120s, you could go Norris, Gasly, both Haas drivers, and then Ricardo or Bottas. Top scoring team at 128 million would have scored 294 points, which I would have loved, but it was not meant to be, as I'm rocking a 120.3 million budget. So that would have been good for me. 279 McLaren, Ferrari, Norris, Gasly, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, and Ricardo. It was not meant to be this weekend. Took a couple of gambles, didn't pay off, but that is okay. Pulled it out. It's kind of, like pulled it out. That was kind of what I was going for there. Lando Norris, second career win, 56 points, second highest score in F1 fantasy this season after Verstappen's 58 in China, and that included a sprint. So great job by Lando Norris here. And he's now the only driver with 2 50-point weekends in F1 fantasy this season. Qualified first, finished first, positions gained 0, 1 overtake, but just as soon as he got past Verstappen on lap, what was it? It was either 8 or 18. I can't remember which one it was. It just plain sailing for Lando the rest of the way. So McLaren has the best car. I'm going to say, I'm wearing my papaya shirt today. I'm going to go to work, going to talk some smack to the Red Bull fans that are around and see how it goes. The Constructors Championship is super close now, especially if Lando can beat Max and Piastri can beat Sergio. Now it's going to get tighter and tighter as the season winds down. And the Drivers' Championship, I still would favor Max, but Lando, we'll see what happens in Monza this weekend, because Ferrari on F1 TV during FP3, Sam Collins was talking about how Red Bull was like the 7th slowest car on the straights. Monza, kind of speedy track, straight line track. So we'll see how Red Bull can adjust for this upcoming weekend in Italy. But great job by Lando Norris, driver of the day, fastest lap on the last lap as well. Pulled that out, took that away from Lewis Hamilton managers. Saw some not so happy F1 fantasy managers about that on the final lap as well. But Lando just put it all together, had a fantastic weekend, stayed calm, kind of. The narrative about him on pole and starting will continue to grow, but it may not matter as much if he's just in the fastest car and can catch whoever is ahead of him. Over here on my team review, points 174, went down 2,300 places, so that was pretty sore, but I did gain 0.8 in budget. I used my wild card, so I actually transferred out 6 of the 7 assets that I had from Belgium into this new team, and I looked at it. If I kept that team, I still would have scored 12 more points with my new wildcard team, which is not ideal, but it did set me up here because I really want to get into the Oscar and George Russell business with the 2 premium drivers. Thinking here was that Bottas would be better than Sargent, especially with the -5 that Logan was going to take in qualifying. Pierre Gasly was a good call. Alexander Albon, I gave him a green flag in green flag, yellow flag, red flag last weekend. I stand by that. I'm still going to, like, on the green flag, yellow flag, red flag report card that is coming out on Wednesday, I'm still going to give myself an A for Alexander Albon. That was good process, bad outcomes. 12 points or 13 points on Sunday, actually. I shortchanged him earlier. Great result by him. Mercedes disappointed because of their race pace on Sunday, but then McLaren also 81 points. So Mercedes and McLaren, well, actually, you know what? We're going to get into this in a little bit here. Check the timestamps below in the description if you want to just kind of jump around if you don't have time for the entire episode. I'm going to talk about constructor conundrums here in a little bit, but McLaren seems to be clearing away the first choice. But there may be a certain red team on the grid that is coming into my thoughts for Monza if this kind of good pace can keep up here. But yeah, overall, kind of happy with where the wild card ended up. But yeah, the points were lacking. I saw like a lot of managers kind of struggling there, although there was some fantastic scores there. I think when I was posting my team on X at F1U and FPL, I think someone had 254 points. So great job by them there. Damaging disqualification. So this is now the fourth disqualification we have had in F1 Fantasy 2024 this year. We've had Magnussen and Hulkenberg in Monaco, Russell in Belgium, and Alexander Albon in the Netherlands. And I have had 3 of those four in my squad whenever they have happened. Fortunately, I did not have Russell in Belgium, but yeah, the double Haas conundrum, because it was also the same weekend where they both DNF'd in the race. And that was just awful weekend. We won't talk about that too much, but yeah, it's a shame. I saw some chatter between, I think it was Pop Pan Man and Rain of Rain Fantasy about it this weekend, and it does feel maybe it's like an off-season discussion, but the disqualification penalties are so heavy, and it's like nothing that we can control as F1 fantasy managers. Like, we can't be calling up James Vowles and being like, yo, is your floor all right? I'm about to lock in my F1 fantasy team. No, that is not how it works. So for the game to remain fun, I felt like a little bit of a lull in the overall like enjoyment of the game from the F1 fantasy community this weekend, just because of that disqualification. It could also be because a lot of Alex Albon managers maybe also had George Russell in Belgium, so it's just like back-to-back hits, which really sucks. So I feel for you if that was one of you. Let me know in the comments below how you are dealing with that, if that has happened to you. But yeah, overall, I think the game probably won't change all that much, but I would suggest in 2025, we kind of lower these disqualification penalties. Like, it's just kind of like, just put it to a -5. They didn't, like, as a not classified, didn't set a time in Q1, make it a -5 for disqualification and just make it a -20 for a DNF in the race. Like, punishing managers more for disqualification, which is something that the teams can control, or is coming down to like what the race stewards is just like a little bit hampering and the enjoyment of the game overall. However, I did do some digging on Sunday morning to look into the top 100 in F1 Fantasy. Went through the global rankings. 29% of teams rostered Alexander Albon, 27% of teams rostered Logan Sargent, 9% of teams had both Williams drivers. One of those 9 teams played their no negative, so great job by them. And 35% of the top 100 rostered neither Williams drivers, which I thought was interesting. I think naturally, being in the top 100, you have a bigger budget, so you're probably able to be out of the Williams and Kick Sauber business. So great job by y'all if you're in the top 100. Let me know in the comments below if you are sitting in the top 100 right now with 9 races to go in the F1 fantasy season. But yeah, it was a pretty big mixture, but it was most like, what is that? 56% of teams, or 65% of teams were at least affected by some sort of Williams blunder this weekend. But just thought that, wanted to let you guys know that happened to a lot of us. I had Albon. I nearly had Sargent as well. That would have been rough, but Yeah, just letting you know, 65% of the top 100 also went through your pain this weekend. Moving over here to F1 Big Data, a fantastic Twitter account. Just something to look into heading into Monza here. Average lap times in the second stint. Norris crushing it, Piastri crushing it. Sainz, Verstappen, and Leclerc all kind of close to each other. Sainz actually way up on Verstappen and Leclerc as well. But Verstappen and Leclerc pretty close there as well. Perez just trailing a little bit behind Leclerc, also just showing that Ferrari really kind of had it on Sunday. And then the race pace in Zandvoort overall, McLaren there 1:15.221, Red Bull 0.344 behind, and then Ferrari only 0.35 behind. Mercedes is not on this because he only did the teams that had a one stop, but just yeah, the gap to McLaren and Red Bull is the same or is way less, sorry, than the gap between Red Bull and Ferrari. So like the Ferrari, like really coming into our thoughts here. So Constructor Conundrum is back in business. We are back into four teams. I'm still not really considering Red Bull, to be honest. They're still too pricey, but just looking at points per race over the season, last six, last three, and then the fastest pit stop points over the last six. So Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes here. On the season, it's Red Bull at 65.4, McLaren 56.5, Ferrari 55.9, and Mercedes down here a little bit, 44.5. Over the last six, it's Red Bull at 59.5, McLaren at 67, Ferrari at 50.1, Mercedes at 50.3. And this is kind of what I wanted to point out. Like everyone has been, including myself, has been pretty down on Ferrari over the last five races coming into the summer break and coming out the summer break. And they really haven't been that bad. Mercedes has been way more like highs and lows, and Ferrari's been pretty consistent. They had a bad weekend in Canada, but since then they've kind of gotten it back together. So good job by them. And then over the last three, Red Bull at 54.3, McLaren crushing it at 74 points per race, Ferrari 51, and Mercedes at 40.6. So over the season, Ferrari has been fairly consistent, 55.9, 50.1, and 51 over the season, the last six, and the last three. So we could do a lot worse than just getting that steady Eddie kind of constructor to pair with McLaren. And that is in my thoughts. I have two transfers heading into Monza, and yeah, I might have to do like a Valtteri Bottas down to a Logan Sargent kind of move. And then I could go Mercedes to Ferrari. That's kind of my initial thoughts. I'll go over that in the early team selection tomorrow's episode. So definitely like and subscribe to the YouTube channel or the podcast to watch or listen to that episode whenever it comes out. And then fastest pit stop points here over the last six, Red Bull at 38, McLaren at 15, Ferrari 18, and Mercedes at 0. So that little peak there in the middle of the season when Mercedes had 5 points in Italy and 5 points in Canada has gone away. They do not have a single fastest pit stops point either, while VCarb has 23 points over the last three races. So great job by them. Just kind of Formula B team coming up to the top of the pack there. And yeah, so Constructor Conundrum is back. Apparently I cannot say that very easily. So yeah, just Ferrari back in our thoughts heading into Monza. Did not think I would be saying that when I did the race preview on Thursday. Price change headlines here. Any excuse to use Kevin Magnussen wearing a Viking hat. I'm going to get it in the episode, especially with him not having a seat on the grid right now for the 2025 season. We've got to use Kevin Magnussen Viking hat pictures as often as I can. Magnussen rises 0.5 million for the fifth consecutive race. Just the budget building king. And I continue to ignore him and I'm kicking myself. I could have gone there on my wild card. I think I was going Magnussen and Sargent instead of Gasly and Bottas. And yeah, that would have been pretty nice, but oh well. I think it would have been about the same points regardless. So not too bad there. Gasly and Hulkenberg also went up 0.5. So I'm not too sad about the Gasly versus Magnussen thing. Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Piastri go up 0.3 in the B tier asset drivers, and then 7 out of the 10 C tier drivers fell in price as well. 3 went down 0.1, and 4 went down 0.2. So DNF roulette, C tier driver roulette, whatever you want to call it, continues to kind of be like you just hope you don't fall in price as much and just get on one of these Gasly Hulkenberg assets. I could also go down from Gasly to Hulkenberg if Hulkenberg has a car with this whole Haas situation that is going on. But yeah, as of right now, Kevin Magnussen, the budget building king, the budget building Viking. That's what I should have said. But yeah, Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Piastri also go up 0.3. Lance Stroll, interestingly enough, has gone back down to 15 million. So one more price fall, and we will have Lance Stroll back as a C tier asset for budget building purposes if you need it, just that extra bit of a boost there. But he is at 15 million, so he would have to have another bad race in Monza before the doubleheader in Azerbaijan and Singapore later on in September. F1 Fantasy Pole Position League updates here. Leapers 1 continues to crush. I think he had a little bit of a rough weekend for him. It would be a fantastic weekend for most of us. I think he fell to 4th in the world. But cheering you on, Leapers 1. You can claw that back. Master of Signs there in 2nd. Ricard Don't in 3rd. Those guys have been 1, 2, 3 for a few weeks now. So great job by them. Driver of the Day and Kevin Race Day round up the top 5. And then for the top 5, just for the Netherlands, Team P2 Party 319, Rupp Racing 314, Ez Money 3 also at 314, Dreams and Hopes 299, and Arrhenius Beta 286. All 5 of those teams used their Limitless chip. Team P2 Party crushed it with pretty much the optimal lineup for the Netherlands. Coming over here to the schedule, upcoming races over the next month-ish. Italy this weekend, Monza, the Tifosi will be out in force for the Ferrari cars. And coming off of Zandvoort, it should be pretty good for them. We'll see if that carries over into the Friday and Saturday data that we can get. Then there's a 1-week break. Then it's Azerbaijan and Singapore as a doubleheader. Quite a distance to travel for a doubleheader. But in Azerbaijan, I will be there on Saturday watching qualifying. So yeah, no live stream for the next 2 races, but I will be back after that. Azerbaijan should be pretty fun. Let me know if you have been to Baku. Let me know kind of what I should be doing there over the weekend. Let me know in the comments below or hit me up on X at F1UNFPL. As for this week's podcast YouTube channel schedule, today is the Dutch Grand Prix review. You're obviously watching it. Early team selection on Tuesday, green flag, yellow flag, red flag on Wednesday, and then the Grand Prix preview and team selection on Thursday. And yeah, another 4 episodes this week coming out of the F1 Fantasy Pole Position YouTube channel. The subscribers been ticking up. Would love to get that boost. We're heading towards 600 now. The goal is let's try and get to 1,000 by the end of the season. I'm putting out a ton of content. The likes, the comments, I appreciate all the support, but hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any F1 fantasy content as we go into the final 9 races of the season. This is when you can make your push into whatever kind of goal you want, wherever you want to finish in your mini league, all that fun stuff. So definitely make sure to be tuned in to my YouTube channel, F1 Fantasy Pole Position, and my X account at F1UNFPL for all the F1 fantasy content and updates that your hearts could desire. But that's going to do it for today's episode. I will be back with another episode tomorrow with the early team selection for Monza. But once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next time.